So, welcome to the Lowdown. If you're here to learn about building rebel menus with organs and offcuts, you are in the right place. As I mentioned, I'm a livestock farmer. I'm in Southeast Washington, programs manager for the Good Meat Project. We're on a mission at the Good Meat Project to build a more ethical meat system. We do that by offering resources and support to folks across the meat supply chain, from farmers and ranchers to chefs, butchers, and consumers. This webinar today is part of the Lowdown, which is our peer-to-peer speaker series. It's designed to help values-driven meat producers learn from and with one another to drive profitability and sustainability in a system that we know is often stacked against us. These webinars are designed to be conversational, so we'll start with some questions that we have, as well as questions that you all have submitted ahead of time. But please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go along. I'll do my best to keep track, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. And feel free to say hi as well. Drop your name in the chat, where you're calling in from, anything that you raise, cook, sell, and anything that you're hoping to learn here today. And we have a few community agreements. They really just boil down to be kind, be open. We're here to connect and support each other. And as I mentioned, we are recording this Lowdown. It'll be available to watch on YouTube afterwards, and I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the recording and any resources that come up today. All right, and with that, I want to get started because I know we have a ton of questions for our guest. You all sent in a bunch already. I have a bunch, so we have an awful lot to talk about. I swear I won't do too many puns, but I had to get at least one in there. So whole animal utilization is a core value of Good Meat Project. It's one of my core values as a livestock producer. I know it is for all of us on this call. So we're always thrilled to meet champions of nose to tail cooking. And our guest today couldn't be a better advocate for it. So I'm really pleased to introduce our guest today, Chef Evan Leichtling. Evan is the owner and head chef of Off Alley Seattle. I had the privilege of being able to eat at Off Alley just a few weeks ago. And I can say this is not biased. This isn't because we have you on today. It was one of the best meals that I've ever had, offal and offcut focused or no. It was blew my mind, and I can't wait to pick your brain and get into some of the mechanics and behind the scenes of how you are using the plate to advocate for organs and offcuts and local sourcing. So really pleased to have you here today, Evan. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the kind words.
Okay, so I want to jump in with the first question here is knowing what I do about your skill level. I know you could have started any kind of restaurant. How did you come to the decision to start one that focuses on organs and offcuts?
For me, I know it's always been a curiosity of working with products that I'm learning, growing with, and that things are then less than traditional. For me, it's that it's always been why do what everyone else is doing? That's cheaper and that's just not interesting to me. And so I discovered offal at a young age, and then eventually I ended up moving to Europe. And so in Europe, offal is just kind of part and parcel. It's also often the highest value meat on the menu. Like in Paris, sweetbreads are and squab are like the two like highest value proteins you often will get in outside of like shellfish and things like that. And so, there it's quite common. And so for me, coming back to Seattle where I'm from, I really wanted to do something where I brought something to the city that wasn't just feeding the tech masses, so to speak. And so for me, offal was something that I was always really interested in and focused on. I spent a lot of my career focusing on. And then secondly, it's I grew up on not fully like farming functional farms, but a farm with goats and chickens and ducks and horses and all those types of stuff. And so and like my mother and sister are vegan actually, and weirdly enough. And so for me, sustainability and treating animals correctly has always been a cornerstone of that. And so using the whole animal and especially working with offal, I mean, like I can tell the quality of an animal's life by eating its liver. Easy. And there's no question about that. And so offal, you can't hide it. If it's bad quality meat, it's bad offal, and there's nothing you can do to make that taste good. It's always like if it's a bad liver, you can never make that into a good mousse. It's always going to taste bitter and acrid. No matter how much salt or red wine or booze you put into it, it's going to taste like shit. And so for me, it's working with small agriculture, working with offal, working with something, good quality products, and really showcasing what, for me, the Pacific Northwest has to offer that most places don't, and most people don't know, is that the Pacific Northwest has one of the most robust agriculture systems that I know of in the United States, outside of maybe Vermont. It has the most caring farmers. It had from meat to seafood to poultry to vegetables, and most people don't know that. When I left Paris as a chef to move to Seattle to open my own restaurant, people are like, why the fuck are you leaving Paris as a chef to go to Seattle? What the fuck is in Seattle? I'm like, better vegetables and meat.
I love that. Thank you for, as a Pacific Northwesterner, I appreciate that. Okay, and so this is kind of inherent in what you were saying, but I'd love to hear in your words, what's rebellious about that?
Well, I don't know if there's anything quite well. I mean, I don't consider it rebellious. It's just who I am. But I mean, I think for me is that, the aspect is I grew up in a very punk rock community and the idea of question everything. So why are we serving hanger steaks over and over again? Why? And there's two of them per cow. This isn't fucking sustainable. And so the idea is that there's a lot of places in Seattle that or and let's be fair, the West Coast in general, that really kind of hang their hat on like, we're sustainable and we love working with small farms and we do this, but I have a ribeye on my menu or I have a hanger steak on my menu. And it's like, there's two hanger steaks per cow. So that means you are serving 25 cows a night if you sell 50 hanger steaks. The fuck? That's not fucking sustainable. As I serve rabbit kidneys on toast, but that's a different conversation. But the point of the matter is that for me, is that it's bucking that trend and just saying, I'm not going to do what everyone else is doing because it's profitable. I'm going to do something that I actually believe in, which might not be the most popular thing. Like when I first opened the restaurant, I had the first food writer I talked to, first question out the door was, Evan, offal, that was cool in the early 2000s. And I just look at him like, it's cool everywhere else in the world all the time, and it never went away. It's just the United States is fucking a lame duck when it comes to some food systems. And she goes, that was a stupid question. I'm like, yeah, it was. That was actually a really stupid question. I'm not like some out of vote trend trying to bring something back. It's just this is what everyone else does, and it's normal. So I don't really consider it rebellious in that sense because I also don't adhere to that situation that what I'm doing is actually that abnormal. It's just not practiced widely in the United States. I don't think that's rebellious. I think it just makes it uncommon.
Yep, exactly. Well, and I want to share, for folks who maybe haven't seen your menu or haven't been to your restaurant yet, and I tell you you need to go. I'll just list a few dishes that you have. This is word for word from your menu. Crispy mutton neck with grilled goose tongue, fried brain nuggets with goat horn pepper barbecue, stuffed pig's foot with pork face sausage and charred scallion, rabbit kidneys on toast, one of your core items, mutton tartare with fried little fish and anchovy dressing, which, as a sheep producer, I'm biased, but that was one of my personal favorites. I would never have imagined eating mutton tartare, and it was incredible. So, talk me through your menu a little bit. You could pretty easily hide some of those organs either in your menu or even in how you're naming them on the board. Um, are you going at all for shock value? Do you see it as just normalizing, like you said, this is normal, and it just may not be to all of your customers? How do you think about that?
Generally speaking, so the shock value side of things is something that I don't adhere to in any way, shape, or form. I don't think, I don't think I don't think it breeds healthy sustainability and it doesn't encourage diners. It encourages people to try it once and go, "Ugh, that was weird," and fuck off. And so I don't like shock. Um, and so like actually like there are sometimes like and the other part that I don't like is I don't like the smoke and mirrors. And so, like I've worked in restaurants where like, hey, I did an offal pot pie and there were rabbit testicles in there. And the chef lied and said there were cannelloni beans or something like that. And people were like, these are amazing. What are these delicious beans? And he's like, they're cannellini beans. And I'm like, they're not testicles. He's like, shut up. And so, like, I don't like that smoke and mirrors, and I don't like the hiding things. I think restaurants have been really good about doing that for years, even with the name that how we raise animals, right? It's not a pig, it's pork. It's not cow, it's beef. And so there's this disconnect where people will eat sweetbreads, but if you called it the thymus gland, people probably would do it less frequently. And the same situation is the two things that, or the three things that are hardest to sell on any menu in any language: brains, tongue, eyes, because they don't have a secondary name.
Mhm.
And so like for example, like we have our like staple pate recipe right now is pork as the ground meat, smoked sweet veal sweetbreads, and veal brains. And like I will gauge the customer because on the menu we actually write veal offal. Part of that is because we don't can't fit it all on our handwritten menu, but the other part of it is that like I know people won't order it because of the brains in it. And I've tried this multiple times over and over again. And veal brain pate or lamb brain pate will not sell. It's fucking
Mhm.
delicious and texturally it's incredible, but it won't sell. And so we tried, what if we just change the name? And so I changed the name, and invariably everyone who tries it goes, "Oh my God, this is so fucking good." But we just tell them it's veal offal or smoked veal offal. And then with the right customers, we will say brains. But like I've missed that mark a couple times. And for example, a woman who was super excited to be there, we caught it afterwards. She was so embarrassed that she didn't want to eat brains. She put her entire pate into her napkin and folded it up and hid it from us until she left. And so the
No.
thing is that there are certain ingredients that people just won't go for. And that's just, but that's human nature, honestly. It's not the American thing. The French do the same thing. I couldn't sell a lamb brain pate in Paris either. And so there are certain things that are challenging that way. But for me, it's not shock. It's not about hiding the ingredients through smoke and mirrors. For me, it's about doing the best preparation. And so sometimes, yeah, like often when we work with liver, it usually invariably gets turned into a mousse. Um, because one of that allows me to have more dishes of that. So if I only can get what, like I got a lamb liver yesterday at the farmer's market, I would have enough portions to serve 8 seared lamb liver, or I can make a mousse and do 20 orders of it. It kind of makes more sense for us to do that. And it's not trying to hide it. It's just sometimes we just can't source enough of it. Where other situations where we're able to say source it or buy the organs not just from one animal but from a collection of animals that got slaughtered, like 8 pigs got slaughtered or 12 lamb got slaughtered, and we can get all their brains. And then we can kind of like do those dishes where we can highlight them a little bit more. But we're never trying to hide anything. So like we do fried rabbit heads, we do fried duck heads, and we'll like great, 20 rabbits were slaughtered. I got all the heads. I only got to buy 8 rabbits, but I did get 20 heads. And so we're not going to try to hide that. We're not going to like braise the meat and pick it and then put it into a pot pie and call it rabbit pot pie, which I mean, you can do, and it's a good use of the offal for sure. Don't get me wrong, but it's a lot of work to put into something where you're just hiding it. And for us is that while it took some time to get us some traction, the big thing for us is that we got known for it. And so people search us out. Like, I mean, I've had two gentlemen who literally told me that they were going to Seattle for work, and what they do is they look for restaurants that serve tripe. And then they go to that restaurant, and that's their barometer of where to find a good meal in a city. Is they look for a restaurant that serves tripe. It doesn't have to be on their menu. They just need to make sure it has it. They've served it before. And then they go, great, I know that's going to be a place that I'm going to enjoy. And so for us is that we find that there's a lot of these ingredients that people don't work with anymore that actually attract people to us because there's not a lot of people who cook liver, sweetbreads, uh, foie gras. That's a different conversation for a lot of different reasons. Squab, tripe. These aren't common ingredients outside of Asian restaurants these days. And so for people who don't want that Asian food experience, if it's high end, there's lots of talented chefs in San Francisco who are doing incredible high-end Asian food and work with these products. Or, obviously dim sum or Chinese restaurants or Japanese restaurants, Korean restaurants, you don't see a lot of that European style. And so we see people attracted to it. So why hide it if there's a market for it? And so, granted, the market is limited. If you have an 80-seat restaurant, 100, 200-seat restaurant, maybe a little bit harder to serve squab, or because people are like, this isn't chicken. It's like, no, it's not chicken. Um, but yeah, so I've never really it for me it's not about shock. It's just about saying it's for me, I think I mentioned this to you when you came in. For me, I view myself much more these days as a food historian than someone trying to create trends. These are all just old foods. There's nothing what I'm doing is inherently new. Maybe some of the preparations that I'm doing are kind of creative new ideas, but for the most part, our cuisine and our dishes and what we call our dishes are rooted in a lot of old tradition.
Yeah, and as you're talking about too, you're talking about like serving brain in pate and how delicious it is. And as a lamb producer myself, I know all of my lamb brains, the whole head is going in the landfill. I see when the processor comes and it goes in a big barrel. And the thought of that being put into the hands of a chef who really knows what they're doing and turned into an incredible meal, like, it makes my heart hurt to like just want that so badly. So, uh,
Well, that's the hard part is that processing right now. Is that like, for example, is that when I first open, I try to get lamb brains because I love them. It then happened to a conversation with the purveyors being like, the processor won't harvest them. It's too much work or it's not worth their time. I'm like, great. Well, then sell me the heads. And so
mhm.
I came to agreement where they would sell me the heads, not by pound, but by each, like I don't know, like $5 each or something like that. Which still, when you think about it, it's a lot of money for brains after the labor you put into it. And then eventually, like the processor was like, no, we're gonna sell them by pound. I'm like, you just charged me $45 a lamb head. What the fuck? And so and then eventually it became a situation where the USDA won't allow them to sell the heads anymore. And so it's a lot of these conversations where a lot of it, specifically with offal right now, it's a combination of the complications of the slaughterhouses and the lack of slaughterhouses, the understaffing of slaughterhouses, the lack of care or people who actually really want the slaughterhouses to do well. They're just profit machines right now, and there's no small mom and pop slaughterhouses anymore, at least not in my region. And then secondly, the third part is, or the third part is FDA, USDA really putting a muck on offal and really you can't buy hearts that are intact because they have to split them open to inspect them, which ruins a whole lot of classic preparations with heart.
Yeah, that's what's wild. When you and I talked earlier and you gave me some insights into the behind the scenes with processing, it sounds so simple. It sounds like, you think about all these animals going to the processor, there's all these parts that just go into the landfill. Let's just redirect those to folks like you who have a use for them. And our system is not set up for that at all.
No, I mean this is not the time for the conversation, but I could go on a whole diatribe about invasive green crabs in Washington and how fucking stupid it is that I can't buy them.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 and that it's actually pretty expensive to buy offal from processors, which is
Yeah.
shocking when you think like it would be going to the landfill otherwise.
Well,
But
like a great conversation with that, right? Is that there was these heritage French chickens that were being slaughtered. There was a flock of 400 being slaughtered all in one go. And I got photos of these chickens. I was like, "Oh, those are the French chickens where the males and females have coxcombs." I love coxcomb. I can never get coxcomb in the United States because we just don't have those chickens. So I was like, I will buy all of the chicken heads. I will buy all of them. Give me all 400 chicken heads. I want the coxcombs. I know you're not going to fucking harvest them for me. I know you're not going to fucking do that, but sell me the chickens. These chickens were being sold for a whole bird for $9 $9.90 a pound. And when I asked for the chicken heads, the guy was like, they're not going to do it. And if they are, they're going to charge you a lot of money. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's garbage. It's fucking garbage. You could charge me $2 a pound. It would make you money. They're like, no, because of the way they process them, they're going to charge you more because it's more labor, blah, blah, blah. When I got a final quote for the chicken heads, they were like $19 a pound for chicken heads. And I was like, are you shitting me? Like, I'm going to literally take a pair of scissors, cut off the thing that weighs 2 grams each, and then throw away the thing that weighs 4 ounces. And you're going to charge me $20 a pound for your garbage? And like, it's like, this is ridiculous. And so it's a tough conversation.
I didn't. How do you prepare coxcomb?
You poach them and fry them.
I had no idea. I've been wasting coxcombs this whole time.
They're really lovely. You can like you basically lightly braise them, and then you can basically once they're kind of braised and tenderized, you can deep fry them, and they're like these like almost like hollow chips. They're really fun.
Wow. And tell me, I know you have a real soft spot for rabbit kidneys. Tell me where that came from. Why do you love rabbit kidneys?
So that was when I was cooking in Paris. There was a restaurant that opened up that my friend took over as the CDC, a Daniel Rose restaurant, Chez Levier. And so obviously going to support friends, new restaurants, things like that, went there and checked it out. And they had this dish of rabbit kidneys on toast. They're kind of their version of it, very French. And I was like, oh my God, this is my fucking favorite thing in the whole fucking world. To a point when I got married in Paris, I had a bunch of American friends and I was doing some R&D with my, who were my business partners at the time to open up my own restaurant. And I took them there to this restaurant. They had it, and then we went to Spain, did some R&D there, came back, and we had one lunch and one dinner with this group of like five bartenders, business owners, and chefs. Where I was like, okay, guys, I've taken you to a lot of my favorite places. We can do one more dinner and one more lunch again. Do you want to do something new? Do you want to do something fine dining, or do you want to go back to something that we already went to? And everyone was like, I want to go back to Chez La Vie and eat those rabbit kidneys on toast. And so I ended up doing my version of that dish at a restaurant in Paris, and I would sell a kilo a day of rabbit kidneys on toast. Kind of my own version of it, obviously, a little bit more Spanish. And so I wanted to do that here in the United States and bring that dish back because I loved it so. And so it's a really funny story talking about sourcing, is that they're really hard to source in the United States because this comes goes back to the French Revolution. The French did this then, and then they started doing it during the Great Depression. But French butchers have always known the difference between a skinned cat and skinned rabbit looks identical, and they look absolutely the same. But one of them has asymmetrical kidneys, and one has non-symmetrical kidneys, or symmetrical kidneys. And so the only way to visually tell the difference between skinned and headless and footed cat and rabbit is where the kidneys sit. So American butchers, because of the Great Depression, still leave the kidneys in rabbit carcasses and they never take them out. And they do that with most animals. But so rabbit specifically, they will not take them out. And so it's always so strange because most people aren't buying hundreds of rabbits. So you can't really do much with the kidneys because, hey, I got 8 rabbits, I've got 16 kidneys. It's a piece of toast. And so, having conversations with rabbit farmers, I still couldn't get them to harvest kidneys for me. But so eventually I was able to source them. And so now it's become one of our staple dishes. It's a really, the, the rabbit knees serve a lot of purpose for us. The one of the big purposes is that they are visible offal. It's here's offal. It's not a mousse. It's not processed. It's literally here's the whole thing. There's not a lot of offal we can really get away with in the same way because they're so cute. They look like little seared beans. Um, and then secondly, they're very light. They don't have that strong livery flavor, because rabbits are so small and slaughtered at a young age, they don't have that piss flavor that, other kidneys can really develop, like veal kidneys or pork kidneys can get. And they're, really easy to, I don't know, the dish is really tasty and people really enjoy it. And
Mhm.
so it's one of those things where initially we would put it on and off the menu, but people would just enjoy it so much that it actually became the first dish that we have never taken off the menu, and we never do now at this point unless it's a sourcing issue.
Okay, I can't wait to come back and have that. Tell me then, as you're talking about how you're preparing some of these things, what are some of the culinary mechanics of making organs taste good? You said at the beginning of our call, if you have a bad liver, it's not going to taste good no matter what you do to it. Can you talk us through kind of the balance of sourcing, how you're sourcing offal, what you're looking for, and then any tips or tricks that you have for how to make some things taste good? And I know there's so many organs we can talk about, but
Yeah.
you can pick your favorites.
Generally speaking, I would say that, the big thing is, you need to know where it's coming from and you need to know the quality of the animal and you need to know the quality of the slaughtering process and what that looked like. And so, when I'm working directly with a farmer, I can ask them questions. So for example, like, farmer sends me a message being like, hey, I'm bringing you your mutton. Do you want the organs? I say, when was it slaughtered? And when are you showing up? He's like, I'm showing up on Tuesday. It was killed today on Sunday. But great. Yes, I'll take this, 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 and this. I'm like, how old was it? They're like, it's 9 years old. I'm like, no, I don't want the kidneys because like I know I don't want 9-year-old kidneys. Um, and so and same thing, right? Is that you don't want to eat brains from an old animal. So nope, I don't want the brains. I don't want the kidneys, but I'll take the liver and I'll take the heart and I'll take, whatever else. And so, first off, if you can know about the animal, that's going to allow you to start splintering off into different ideas of what you want to do. Secondly, it's going to be, is it fresh or is it frozen? And so that starts changing dishes. When you want to do, if you have access to both, you know, if you're cooking something like rabbit kidneys on toast or seared or doing liver and onions or whatever, what have you, like liver focused things, those benefit being served seared if they're not frozen. And that's kind of the blood thing and medium rare and things like that. No one wants to eat a frozen ribeye, right? So don't eat a frozen seared rare rabbit liver. Um, and so um and so the secondary part is going to be then knowing if it's frozen, that kind of sometimes can change the way you want to go and direct things. Like, sure, it was slaughtered and frozen immediately from a great animal, but then maybe those things might be better into pâtés or mousses or sausages and things like that, where they're not the you can hide their flaws, so to speak, because freezing offal, most of it isn't good for the offal. Most offal you want to eat fresh. Or let me rephrase. Offal is a bigger category. Most organs, true organs, not just offal and pig's feet, things like that. Um, Organs benefit from being fresh. So often when we get frozen organs, those often will end up in stews, braises, sauces, mousses, pâtés, things like that. Um, and so, and part of it, like honestly, one of the big things I always tell people is you can use your nose and you can always taste it. Like if you smell it, and it's like I remember like blanching like lamb sweetbreads that I realized were actually coming from mutton. Blanching them like, no, oh God, these are awful. You can smell bad offal. And your body is really good about, specifically with organs, if you don't want to eat it. Your body knows it and you don't need to taste it often. Then, the situation is that there are going to be situations where there's going to be certain things where, like, the liver is a really good example. Sometimes you're just like, oh man, this is really intense and bitter. And sometimes it comes from how was the animal slaughtered? What were they eating? What were they processing? Were they drinking dirty water? All this type of stuff. Obviously, the liver is a processor. And so you're going to taste it. And so, when you're buying, like for example, like someone told me the other day, like they worked for Alaska Airlines. He's like, yeah, I got 3,000 pounds of Draper Farms chicken liver in my freezer. You want some frozen chicken livers? I could unload cases for you and no one would notice. I'm like, no, I don't want it. Like, I'm not going to use fucking Draper chicken livers. It's fucking disgusting. There's nothing I can do to make that taste good. It's fucking garbage. That is dog food. That's dog food.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the thing, right? Is that so it's kind of this three-tier thing. And then from there, it's about and that's kind of one of the complications with offal is that offal falls into a category where all the different organs all require different preparations, and sometimes there's overlaps, but they're all going to be a little bit different. Like, most of them you need to peel, and most people don't know that, right? You need to peel rabbit kidneys, you need to peel the liver, you need to peel the heart. They all have this membrane sac around all organs that you need to peel almost all of them in order to start the next step of preparations, depending on what you're doing. If you're searing them, you have to peel them. If you're grilling them, you need to peel them. Going into a sauce or a mousse, don't need to peel them. And so there's a lot of education based around offal. And that is, I mean, even for me, I'm still learning, right? Is that we're going to get lamb testicles in next week. I'm like, great, I've eaten these. I have not prepared them because they look like giant ostrich ages. And the one time I was a young cook, I was like, I'm intimidated, scared, don't know what to do. And this was before a lot of the English literature was out. Originally, you had Fergus Henderson's book out, which talked a little bit about it. But there's been a couple more books recently written in English where there's more information about processing different parts of offal. Chris Constantino, his Offal Good book, has a great, front section where it actually really talks about all of that, where he goes through a lot of different organ meats and goes through it because a lot of these books, sadly, are in really old French books or things like that, where they're not translated very well, and they're also written. I mean, the thing is, like, these old books are written with the idea that you already know how to do it, and they're giving you guidance because you watch grandma do it 1,000 times, and then this is telling you the steps as a reminder, right? It's like the joy of cooking. The old versions of joy of cooking, you read these recipes like, that's not really helpful. That gave me the ingredient list, but like you said, whip it all together. And what does that actually mean? And the old French books are often written that way as well. So there's not a lot of literature about how to process offal. And so that's one of the challenges. And so one of the things is kind of like I suggest to people is like master one thing first and then move on to the next one. Like practice with liver and then move on to hearts and then move on and like try things yourself because it's it's a lot of trial and error. And like I teach a lot of people how to do this stuff, but I had to do a lot of trial and error to get there. And I'm sure, say, Chris Constantino did the same thing. Granted, he has an Italian background and I have the French. And so we learned from those cultures because they are offal heavy. But if you're not over there or you're not learning directly from someone who already knows how to do that, it's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, that's what's kind of a shame for folks who are interested in cooking with offal now, whether it's home cooks or aspiring chefs or even chefs who just haven't cooked with it a lot, is there isn't as much passed down knowledge like you're saying. If you decide that you want to learn how to cook heart, you can find some recipes. They are out there, but the first heart I ever had, it was a friend of mine who had worked in restaurants and knew a great recipe. And so the very first time I cooked it with him and it was amazing. And I've loved heart ever since. And that can be kind of the decision point, right? If I had tried it by myself and didn't know how to cook it and then it turned out terrible, I'd be like, well, I guess I don't like organ meats. And then so it's a shame that we don't have as much of that passed down, which is why I'm so glad that there are folks like you who are doing this. Um,
It is part of that conversation, though. I mean, like, even in European cultures, right? It's often a situation where it's like, hey, I come from a family of farmers, so I know how to cook offal because that's the best part. It's very nutritious, and you get it straight from the farm because you slaughter it. That's the first thing you eat. Or it goes to restaurants or to someone who knows how to do it. And so there's like these community members who know how to use these things, right? It's like the same idea is that what a lot of it's like that village mentality, right? Is that, yeah, I need my shoes broken. You go to a cobbler. It's like, yeah, I I have this animal that needs to get slaughtered or I have all this offal, you go to the person who knows how to do it because it's specialized knowledge, right? And it's not just throwing a piece of meat in a pot and braising the shit out of it. Yeah, anyone can do that. And you can do that with a brisket, you can do it with a ribeye, you can do it with a pig's head. It's not hard. It's the offal is a little bit more specialized knowledge, and even in those old European cultures, it still falls into specialized knowledge. Like grandma deals with that. Grandma's the only person who touches that one. Then eventually grandma teaches mom how to do it before she dies.
yeah, yeah. We had a great question too from Adam. Hi, Adam. Adam said, "I'd love to know more about the ideas of why not to eat brains from older animals. Is it just taste, or are there other concerns?"
There's a so animal brains, I always forget. It's not it's I always forget the name of the chemical. There is a thing in brains that develops over time that can make people quite sick. It's something having to do with the spinal column in the brain. And so there is a small risk to humans. It's like that whole mad cow thing or whatever. There's a certain yeah, sorry, prions. Thank you. That's the word. I was gonna say purines. I'm like, it's not purines. Those develop over time. And so the longer the animal lives, the more those develop. So the higher the risk the factor is from older animals. And so generally speaking, brains are safe to eat from older animals most of the time, but it's like that situation of bear, right? You always cook the shit out of bear because it's probably going to have trichinosis. Doesn't mean it always has trichinosis, but you really need to do it because it's like back in the day with pork, we always cook pork all the way through because of the fear of trichinosis, even though it's not always there. It's like the same thing with salmonella, right? Not every chicken has salmonella. If you eat raw chicken, it's not necessarily going to give you salmonella, but the chances are much higher with certain things. And so that's kind of falls in the category of brains is that there's a higher chance.
Hmm. Oh yeah, so They're asking, scrapies. Yeah, scrapies is the sheep-based prion disease. Goat wouldn't have a risk. Would you prepare old goat brains? Can we see old goat brains on your menu? Is the question.
I would need to do some more research because I've heard, generally speaking, from most animals, I've heard that they all have their own various things that they develop. And so something about that area is, generally speaking, a lot of my learnings have always been you avoid the organs from older animals in the neck and the head. And that also applies to like sweetbreads from old animals. I've been trying to there's been butchers who try to sell them to me a couple times, but I've never had any success with them. They always taste terrible. But generally speaking, the way that I've always learned is essentially from the neck up. This is where all those glands are, and the brains, obviously outside of the tongue, which is a muscle, it's technically not an organ. All the organs basically neck up. So the glands, the brains, etc. Generally speaking, from older animals, you usually want to avoid them. And it's like one of those situations where sometimes there's situations like that where for me as a cook, it's like, yeah, why do you put red wine corks in your octopus brace? I'm like, because old Italian grandmothers and Spanish grandmothers do it, and I don't ask why. There's no research to prove that this is a bad thing or a good thing, but they do it, and I'm not gonna buck 200 years of tradition. And so for me, I don't have that actual technical details about that. Sometimes I just trust the old ways.
And how much are you able to tell specifically in organs like the finish of an animal? You know, the grass-fed, the grass finished versus grain finished is always a big conversation in our space. How much do you pay attention to that? How much can you tell how it was finished in like the liver or the kidneys?
Honestly, the thing is that I don't so I work with a lot less beef. That's just personal. That's It's a lot of various different reasons to that, and that's a whole different hour-long conversation. I don't work with a whole lot of beef. And so generally speaking, most of what I'm working with isn't corn finished anyways.
Yeah.
I'm working with pigs, and so it's like, hey, we just feed them fermented barley all the time because we have all this excess blah blah blah, or we feed them whey, or it's like, oh, they're apples from the orchard, or whatever the fuck. And then so obviously, most in the wintertime, yeah, they're eating hay, and in the summertime, the sheep are eating grass. And so those types of conversations of corn finishing, they're not often really in my conversation with farmers because we're not working a lot with those animals, and so it's hard for me to say, I definitely can see it, for example, is that, when I work with squabs and whole squabs, there's definitely situations where I can, because they often still have food in their gullet. And so I can definitely see the difference between, yeah, the livers are a lot fattier with corn versus when they're eating peas and barley and chickpeas. And so when there's a heavy corn diet, I can definitely see that difference. And so, I mean, from a liver standpoint, the liver benefits from it. A fattier liver it's nicer. Actually, it does taste a lot better. So, you're going to have a better quality liver often from corn finished things in terms of a flavor profile and things like that. But in terms of the real differences between grass finished and corn finished, I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of conversation with that because I just don't work with farms that are really doing a lot of that because I'm working with a lot of small, very small independent farms.
Yeah. Love that. A quick goat brain update. Adam's doing some behind the scenes research for us, which is lovely. And says quick research shows scrapie impacts both goats and sheep, so avoid. So if anyone was running out to harvest old goat brains, stop. Do some research first. That makes sense because you do
Always, always
scrapie
all
tags.
right.
Yeah, you do scrapie tags for both goats and sheep, so that makes sense. Thank you, Adam. Okay, man, the time's flying by already. I want to get to some questions from participants too, but let me ask you a couple more before we get in there. Just about, I want to learn a little bit about how you're building your menu, especially since you're doing so much local sourcing. I know you go to the farmers market all the time. You're talking to farmers. It probably changes, I don't know how much it changes maybe day to day or menu to menu, but how often are you like, oh, I want to do a dish with rabbit heads. Let me talk to my farmers and see if I can get some rabbit heads versus your farmers saying, hey, we have a bunch of rabbits. There's a bunch of heads. Can you make something with this? How does your menu start?
So asking like, hey, I want to do this dish with this. Can I source this? That is almost never, honestly. It's very, very rare. It's very, very select things. it's usually going to be something that's going to be very specific. That's a popularity thing. So like foie gras would be an example, right? Is that that's a specific kind of difficult sourcing thing that I have to plan on, things like that. But generally speaking, the way I always talk to people about it, and one of the important parts about working with offal is and working with small farms is that what I always tell people, and the farmers specifically, is I work for the farmers, they don't work for me. And what I mean by that is that when they say they have something, I say, great, I'm going to make that work. And so, or I talk with them and be like, I need this to make this work. And so, we're a small space, so we can only take so much at a time. So it's about, for me, it's a lot of scheduling. So it's like, great, I have, lamb offal. I had a bunch of lamb offal coming in today or yesterday. Great. I'm not buying offal this week from any other source. Next week, I'm getting a whole pig in. Great. That means I'm not going to get another whole animal in for 2 weeks. And so a lot of this goes to availability of when the farmers want to slaughter. And again, really complicated with slaughterhouses right now, specifically when I'm working with some of the island farmers, is that their slaughter dates are they don't have a choice. Is they say, when can I get this animal killed? They say it's going to get killed on Tuesday. So they're like, great, Evan, I'm going to be there on Thursday. And I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing. And so for me, a lot of the menus, and the same thing with farmers markets, I have this one farmer he's so sweet. He keeps being like, tell me what you want me to grow. I'll grow things for you. I'm like, I don't work like that. I don't remember to tell you, even though that's a wonderful offer. I don't know what to tell you to grow because my brain doesn't work that way. So for me, working sustainably is working with what's in season and what's available. Because as soon as you start asking for something or building a dish around an idea you have, for example, hanger steaks or something like that, then you are looking for a rabbit hole and you're looking for that thing. And if you're looking for something with an intention of a dish, that's not working sustainably because that's not worth working with what you have. And so for me, the way that I kind of keep my creative juices flowing and working sustainably and working with small farmers, really small farmers specifically, is when they say, I have this glut or I have all this stuff, can you take it? I say, I don't know what the fuck to do with that, but okay, sure, we're gonna figure it out. We're like, another conversation, sea cucumbers, right? It's like this guy's like, I got all these sea cucumbers, no one wants to buy them. I'm like, okay, I have no fucking idea what to do with sea cucumbers. I need to do some research. I need to look this up. I need to figure it out. I need to look at different cultures and how they prepare them. And I need to figure out a way to adapt this and change it to a way where I can make this palatable to my clientele. And our answer was we discovered through research that the longer you braise sea cucumbers, the more tender they get and the more soft they get, and eventually they kind of get this texture of like an octopus leg. And I was like, that's a texture I can sell. I can't do the slimy slippery thing that the Chinese do. I can't do the raw thing that the Japanese do. But if I braise it and then grill it like an octopus leg, that I can sell, and it works great, and people love it. And so that's kind of for me, it's starting with what's available and working backwards because and that is a little bit more challenging, and I do know that. But that's the big difference of working sustainably because as soon as you start looking for something, you are not working with supply, you are demanding something. And then the demand creates a supply. So if what you are demanding is unsustainable or not repeatable, it's not sustainable. And so, for example, I might have a great dish where I'm like, oh my God, I fucking love these rabbit heads. But if I can only get 20 rabbit heads, all of a sudden I'm dealing deals with an importer from Spain because they're willing to like cut off the heads consistently. And then they're shipping me rabbit heads from Spain so I can get them or Ireland or wherever the fuck. And that's how I'm able to source this thing that I want for this awesome dish. Get fucked. That's how
Yeah,
things
well,
work.
exactly. And so what's insane about that to me, though, is how much flexibility you have to have as a chef. How often are you changing your menus? It's weekly, right? That you're doing.
Well, so that's part of the conversation, right? And so this is a challenge that I do know that when we know, I think you asked me like, how can more chefs do this? I'm like, what I do is kind of psychotic and borderline manic, and I can't necessarily always suggest everyone to do what I do, but that's part of it, right? Is that so it puts a lot of strain on me to constantly come up with new dishes because part of that is sourcing, right? So we got in two lamb livers, two lamb tongues, two lamb hearts yesterday. That's enough for 1 or 2 days. So I'm going to come up with different dishes or two different dishes using those ingredients. And then when they're gone, they're gone. And then I need to replace that with a new dish. So part of that also as well is I have to kind of schedule these dishes out where part of like I mean I'm not that type of brain, but or person to have a flow sheet or Excel sheet, but essentially I have to have this flow sheet of saying we're going to start here and do this dish, and then here's the next runner up, and here's the next one after that. And so knowing that we're kind of moving through these things, and so part of that dish change in the menu is we write the whole menu out once a week, guaranteed. Nowadays, in the spring and summertime, usually we're going to do it again on Saturday. So we're going to do it 2 times a week. We'll start with the new menu on Thursday, and then Saturday we'll probably be out of 4 to 5 of the dishes that started the week on Thursday, and then we'll need to change them into new dishes or adjust the dishes. So maybe we're out of this ingredient and we switch to this ingredient. I got shorted on nettles from Purveyor, a forager yesterday. So it's like, great. Well, we have nettles for Thursday, but I need a replacement for Friday for the nettles in this dish. So I went to the farmer's market and I was like, okay, great. These super sweet sugar snap peas, those will work with this other component that I'm working with, and it will be really nice. And so that's going to be the substitute for that. And so the same thing happens with our meat is that, most of what we're working with the exception of a couple specialty items that I order so I can keep them on the menu, like the rabbit kidneys on toast, like the foie gras. There's very few dishes where we work with meats where we're able to do that. And so for us, it's working with a whole animal. So like when I get a whole lamb in or a whole mutton in or a goat or whatever, it's like day one is pork chops, day two is saddle or T-bones usually. Day three will be if there's an animation of something fresh still. Maybe it's tartare from the hind leg. And then at that point, by day four, we've probably braised off the shoulder, or we've braised off the neck, or we've done something like that where something's been in brine and marinated and then roasted or braised, where we're able to use that. So when we're working through a whole animal, the menu changes every day. Day one, it's this with this. Day two, it's this. Maybe with day one and two, it's the same garnish preparation, but it's a different cut. Day three, we're going into a tartare, and maybe it's the tartare, and by then we've braised the shoulder off or marinated enough to roast it. And so then we have the tartare from the back leg and the braised shoulder. And so it's a matter of these dishes kind of having their cycles and using what's priority. So obviously, offal gets the first priority. So when whole animal comes in, if there's organs with it, the organs are the first thing to get processed and go first one to go on the menu. And then sometimes we won't crowd the menu. So for example, I could have had rabbit liver mousse on the menu, rabbit rice on the menu, fried rabbit on the menu, and fried rabbit heads on the menu all last week, all in one go. It's too much rabbit. They're going to compete with each other, and it's going to be dispersed all of them too equally, so none of them are going to sell. So we braised the rabbit heads, keep them in the braise, which holds them for an extra couple days. The rabbit liver needs to go immediately, so the rabbit liver goes quickly, and there's so much rabbit meat, we need to get that moving, and that won't steal from other organ meats. So it's rabbit rice, and then it's rabbit liver on the menu the first week. Next week is the buttermilk brine rabbit loins, and or we used the heads first. So it was fried head, liver, and then meat. And then so next week, it's like, great, the heads are first, then it's the rabbit loins that are buttermilked and buttermilk brine. And so it's about moving through these things. So it's working with whole animals and small farms and fresh stuff and trying not to use a freezer or a lot of like, let's chemical or modern processing preservation techniques. It requires moving through things and a lot of planning, but that flexibility, right? Is that you need to be able to think on your toes to be able to do this. Because if you try to treat a rabbit leg the same way as a rabbit shoulder, it's gonna make more work for you in the end. It's easier to separate those two things out to different processes.
Yeah, well, and you've built your systems around this core vision, right? And so what's also so cool and unique about your restaurant is, you're talking about the menu changing. You literally hand write it on like a chalkboard, which not only comes across as like kind of fun and punk and cool, but it also just is easier for you. I imagine you could have made it a lot harder for yourself and say, okay, we have to reprint the menu every time we make a change. But you have it built in, and you're also creating that expectation with your customers that part of what's exciting about going to your restaurant is the menu's changing all the time. And so if you want something, you better get there this week. And if you went there last week, you're going to want to go again next week because there's something new on the list there. And so oh man, we only have like 5 minutes left. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat because this is flying by. But the other thing that I wanted to mention too is, you were saying the main thing that I'm taking away, Evan, from your approach to all this is you're saying, what you're doing isn't necessarily replicable, but the kind of core of what you're doing is so authentic to you. And it seems like I know you've really spent a lot of time figuring out your systems, honing in on just a laser sharp vision and doing it your way. It's a 12-seater restaurant. So I imagine part of the reason you're able to make this work too is because you're keeping it intentionally small scale. And I've heard you say, like, I'm not trying to get bigger. This is what I want to do and I want to do it well. So the lesson that I'm taking from you is for other chefs or folks who are interested in this work, it's not about trying to do what Evan's doing. It's trying to do your vision, laser focus in on what your vision is, and what you're doing isn't replicable, but the authenticity of what you're doing potentially is. It's
I
hard in
think
our system.
I
It
think
doesn't
part
make
of
it
it, I
easy.
mean, I think part of it is that, like, what I'm doing, I'm sure, there's ways to replicate aspects of what I'm doing, no doubt. And however, I wouldn't suggest
Yeah.
it. Um, I work all the time, quite literally, but I enjoy it. And so I think, for me, it's about while what I'm doing is very difficult to replicate, and I wouldn't suggest it in the same way, the idea is inspiring people to take parts of it, right? Is that no one should be a carbon copy of me because, well, I'm my own psychopath. But people should take pieces of what I'm doing. And so say, great, like I want to focus on this. I got an 80-seat restaurant. What Evan's doing doesn't make sense, but I can run this special and I have 12 orders a night, right? And I can do this lamb heart thing because I work with a small farmer. He killed 10 lamb. I have 10 lamb hearts. We're gonna brine them and smoke them and turn them to heart pastrami. And we're gonna run a heart pastrami sandwich and we're gonna have it for a fucking day. And that's okay. And that idea of that's okay. It's okay to run out of something. It's okay. And that idea of working with small farms requires for you to start explaining to guests, being like, yeah, we're out of it. We had what we have and we're done. And that is, there's this idea of that, I always like, for example, like our restaurant, like I never intended this. There's a lot of FOMO around some of our dishes disappearing, right? And guests get anxious about it. And I'm like, there's a big difference between anxiety and anticipation. And so you anticipate hoping you get this thing. And if you don't, you try again later. It's not about being anxious about not having it. That's a feeling that a lot of people are getting confused these days.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, yeah, there's so much customer education in what you're doing as well. And also saying like we didn't have this week or this month or this season because it's not in season. And meat also has seasonality and seafood has seasonality too. And there's just so many layers in what you're teaching, what you're getting across to people in the food that you're making. Okay, we only have time for maybe one question, and I wanted to one or two left. I wanted to get in one from a farmer perspective. We had a farmer write in and ask if you have any suggestions for their direct market customers to trying the offal that they're selling. They said, I share how delicious it can be. I offer recipes, but at least half of our customers don't choose to take it when ordering their grass-fed, grass-finished beef from them. Any thoughts or advice for farmers who are trying to get their customers to try organs or offcuts?
Well, and I think this is kind of the complicated conversation is that I don't think it's the farmer's job. I think it's the chef's job. And so for me, it's more of a conversation of that farmer then needs to connect with the chef, get a chef to make these dishes really incredible and introduce these ingredients for this community and for these people. And then that is what drives it. And because at the end of the day, it's kind of this supply demand thing, right? And so part of my role in the food system is I get a microphone, right? As a chef, people want to talk to me. People want, I'm in the New York Times. Farmers aren't in the New York Times. Well, not about food systems for this, right? It's not the farmer's recipe is in the New York Times. And so the idea is that for me, it's we have the spotlight on us right now, and we have had since Anthony Bourdain became popular. And so it is our job to use our voices and our microphone to amplify these things, create delicious dishes, and get excitement around guests for it. And then that's where the education of how to teach someone how to do it, that's where the farmer comes in. That's where those recipes come in. That's where the Julia Childs and Food Network things come in, is that Alton Brown's, that education of teaching someone how to do it at home. But it's at the end of the day, the farmer is going to have a really hard time being like, you should buy this. It's fucking delicious. People are like, scared, don't know, nervous, unfamiliar products and challenges with it. I'm shy about spending money on something that I don't know what to do with. Right now, on the flip, if they go, oh my God, I love X so much at X restaurant, I want to learn how to make that for myself because I don't want to spend X amount of money on X restaurant and X thing over and over again, right? And that's where that comes from. And so for me, it's about, I mean, my only suggestion with a farmer being like, if you know how to make it prepare it deliciously, have a potluck and cook a bunch of it and tell people and have people try it. But at the end of the day, the way to get people to eat offal who are shy around it is introduce it to them in a way that they're going to enjoy it and get them to try it first. Getting people to buy it and cook it from a raw product is basically almost impossible. But that
Thank you
can be
for that.
applied to anything, anything that's
Yeah.
un.
And that's so refreshing to hear too, because I think farmers especially feel a lot of pressure to also be the chef and be coming up with these brilliant recipes. And we just don't have time for it. We can't do all of that. And that's why we need every single step along the meat supply chain and why we value every single part so much. We need chefs. Like I don't think there's enough conversation around that, how much our farmers need chefs and our chefs need farmers. And so appreciate that perspective. Thanks, Evan.
No,
Um,
absolutely. No, it's a whole ecosystem, and
yeah,
we're all very balanced and carefully working together. And the problem is that some of those, let's call those balances, have started kind of getting a little out of whack. And that's part of the reason why a lot of our food systems are starting to collapse into each other, is that because the parts of the hexagon or triangle or whatever shape it is, they're not all working together to support each other anymore. And so it's getting unbalanced, and that unbalance is causing harm across everybody. But people aren't viewing it that same way.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're almost out of time here, and I know you've got lamb brain deliveries and all kinds of things going on over there. So let me just give you a last chance, or a last moment here. If is there anything you want to tell us about what you've got coming up? Anything on your menu or with your restaurant that you want to share with folks?
I can't really think of anything. We're real busy right now, and FIFA's coming up, and we'll see what that brings. But no, I mean, we're just excited for summer. We've got a bunch of small farms that we're working with that we're really excited to start partnering with. And then in the fall, we'll start probably inviting chefs back in and doing some fun events. But right now, it's just moving through all the wonderful product of the summer, and kind of we always just kind of put our heads down when the farmers market kicks up and focus on all of that jazz.
It's great. And in the follow-up email here, I'll send links to your Instagram, but you can follow Oaf Alley Seattle on Instagram. And you also have the Off Alley, I said Oaf Alley, Offal. The Off Alley menu has its own Instagram, which I find very fun to follow. So Evan, thank you so much for your time and your insight and just for the work that you're doing for our food system. We really, really appreciate it. We're at time here. Let me just share a couple quick things from the Good Meat Project universe here. If you are not familiar with our Good Meat Finder, this is a national directory that we launched last year. It's pretty unique. If you are here and you're a farmer, a rancher, a butcher, a chef, or a business owner, you should be on this directory. It's unlike any directory I know. It lists everybody across the meat supply chain, and you can put in all of your various practices. It's not just one certification or one practice. We want you to be able to showcase your specific values for your operation and match you with customers that share those values. So if you're not already on our Good Meat Finder, please join in. I'll drop the link in the chat here. And lastly, if you appreciated this lowdown today, we're able to offer these for free thanks to generous donations from folks like you. So if you want to take the next step in supporting our programming, please consider making a donation. Any size makes an impact, and we really appreciate it. And with that, I will say thank you everyone so much for joining us. Thank you everyone who even just showing up here. You're doing good work for our food system. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our next lowdown. Thanks everyone.